Hi folks, I told you that the A9 III will be the world's fastest camera and that it will be announced sometimes between November 2023 and January 2024. That's what trusted sources told me, but for the rest I don't have specifics about the camera that I can share as of today. Trusted sources are tight-lipped because of course they have to protect themselves. They cannot share really details about the camera. All I'm getting are info from other news sources, so that means that most of the time that's just BS and untrue or just a guess or somebody making some fool jokes about this. But one of the news sources sent me a full spec list of alleged spec list of the A9 III, which I think is very likely not to be true. But for the sake of discussion, just let's see for once what kind of unconfirmed rumors I'm receiving about the A9 III. I got a list of 18 A9 III specs and let's go through all of them. The first one says that the video specs will be similar to the A7 IV, which means no 8K and no external RAW. It might not make you happy to not have 8K on this camera, but I think this will not be a high resolution camera and that's not the main market for the A9 III anyway, so even if that would only be a guess and not a real A9 III spec list, I think this is going to be very close to the real A9 III that will be announced in late 2023. The second spec is where things start to get very in a new direction, unexpected direction, because the source said that the A9 III will have a completely new body with built-in vertical grip. We'll use two FZ100 batteries that can be independently swapped without turning the camera off. And I think this is really probably unlikely to be true. That's where I started to think like, that spec list is likely to be fake. I can see a reason why Sony would go for a camera with integrated vertical grip. Maybe you can add in the comment system your reasoning about that, why you think this makes no sense, or if it makes sense for some reason that I don't understand, please write it down. But I think it's unlikely that Sony will announce an A9 III with integrated grip, but I hope to be wrong. Maybe that it would be exciting to see something different for once, but let's leave it like this. Let's go to point number 3. He said there will be a new 3.4-inch tilting ultra bright dual touchscreen that will allow the use of glows. Having those kind of new features on the A9 III would be quite a big step forward. Usually Sony makes only incremental steps, but I would be happy to be proven wrong. I think having a larger, brighter, fully operable touchscreen that you can even use with glows actually would be amazing, and I think also good news for sports photographers when they shoot, for example, in cold environments. It would make a lot of sense for Sony to add that feature. But again, I'm skeptical this is going to happen. Let's move on. Additional custom buttons and switches. Source suggested that both top dials would have lower contour rings and one would be customizable. The fifth spec is that it will use dual CF Express Type A SD slot and be compatible with saving directly to SSD via USB. That makes sense to me, so that's very likely to be true anyway, no matter if that spec list is made up, wrong or invented. I think the A9 III is likely to have that. The sixth point claims that the A9 III will have a cutting-edge sensor cleaning and dust water prevention system will be featured, but details are still very secret even within Sony. It would make sense for the Sony A9 III to have that feature. It's a workhorse camera made for professionals, so being super rugged and reliable is very important, so hopefully the Sony A9 III will have such kind of feature. It will have the new BIOS processor to support enhanced autofocus. The A9 III is reported to be the fastest mirrorless full-frame camera on the world. That's what a trusted source told me, so I expect it to have a new process engine, so this is definitely going to be true. It will use a new 29 megapixel sensor with global electronic shutter with no mechanical shutter. I know Nikon is moving to a full electronic shutter, so I think there's a fair chance the A9 III will also move into that direction, although I told you in a past video that I'm actually also a fan of the mechanical shutter because I still see sometimes artifacts on electronic shutter, and I want to be sure that the image I get is not having that artifact, so I'm actually shooting with mechanical shutter only. But of course I'm not a sports photographer. I don't need the speed. If speed is your ultimate thing, you have to go electronic shutter. So it's likely that the A9III will have pure electronic shutter. It will have ultra fast startup speed. The 10th feature is that it will have 120 frames per second full res HEIF for 2 seconds burst, limited by sensor memory. Source hinted that a 240 FPS reduced megapixel mode has been proposed to counter the Z9. 60 frames per second full resolution HEIF compressed RAW with large buffer. 30 FPS uncompressed, compressed, lossless, RAW. Those would be amazing specs. Like I told you before, my trusted source told me that it will be a very speedy camera, very fast. So even if those kind of specs that I'm reading now are not the right ones, I think the A9III performance will be really close to that what I'm reading to you. The 11th spec is that the EVF will have a 4.76 million dot resolution with 240 Hz dynamic refresh, which will vary the refresh rate for battery saving. The 12th spec is that the A9III has a car and motorcycle EF tracking mode. I think this is very likely. The A9III will have AI features just like any new camera coming out, and having a specific function for car and motorcycle makes sense to me. The A9III will have 240 EF calculations per second. This is 4 times as fast as the A9II. It will also have 2200 EF points with 100% coverage. This would be a stunning autofocus performance, and I think the A9III will definitely be the best camera on the world in terms of autofocus performance. I don't know again if those specs are right, but I definitely expect it to have much more autofocus points than any other Sony camera to date. Spec number 15 says that it has 960 FPS cropped at 1080p, 480 FPS oversampled at 1080p, and 240 FPS cropped 4K. Spec number 16 says that it has enhanced voice-to-text metadata writing with built-in GPS, GLONASS, BeiDou, QZSS. It will have 5G cellular and improved Wi-Fi speeds with port for external long-range Wi-Fi antenna. And the last point says it will have 5G based Ethernet point. I think this is also likely to happen. The A9III has to have those solid connection features for serious broadcast use. So I think that could be true. And those were the 18 specs shared by the news source. I think some of the specs are certainly going to be right anyway, no matter if the source is serious or not serious. I think most of the specs are likely to be on the A9III. Some are quite wild, but I'm crossing my fingers that they will happen, because I would love the A9III to be more than just a reliable step forward, but also to implement some kind of new features. So I would keep my fingers crossed that the specs actually are right, because I think this would be an exciting camera. That was just an exercise of wild rumors, and I will tell you over the next couple of weeks and months if trusted sources will come back to me and confirm or deny that rumor. As soon as I have more info, I will post a new video. So please again subscribe if you don't want to miss that. And that's it for today. I see you soon.